Tonight we're going to be studying about Gideon's son, Abimelech. And so that's going to be our focus. Will be in the book of Judges, in Judges chapter 9. Judges chapter 9, if you want to follow along with the story of Abimelech. Interestingly, as we study through the Judges, how the tendency might be to focus on the people because the story's about the people, but I've been trying to bring up to you the importance of focusing on God in all of these stories, because really God's people have become sinful time and time again, and God has continually been gracious toward them and providing them with the salvation, the deliverance they need from the enemies that God raises up to punish them for their disobedience. And whenever they cry out to him, he again responds over and over and over again. And that cycle has just continued in the book of Judges. But as we come to chapter 9, we notice that there's no cycle like that. Chapter 9 is not your typical story of a judge in the book of Judges. In fact, as we read chapter 9, we don't see the typical comments at all. There's not an oppressive nation that rises up because the people sin. There's not a people crying out to God, and there's not a judge that God puts his spirit on and brings in to deliver the people at all. The story of Abimelech is not the story, I would say, of a judge, even though I used to think that. It seems like it's the story of the consequences of the sin of a judge. And so that's what we're going to be studying about this evening, is the story of a judge's son and what happens to him. If you remember from chapter 6 through 8 of Judges, there was a picture of God providing a judge in the man Gideon. And Gideon was a very timid man who was unsure. Remember, he was found in the wine press, hiding his wheat from the evil Midianites who would just come in and take all of their food. Well, he ended up being the one God chose. And if you remember, God raised up Gideon with an army of 300. Went from 32,000 to 22,000 to just 300 to go up against 135,000 Midianites and Amalekites. So God did this in this way to say to everybody, this is not through man, but this is through me. And yet, at the end of that story, as we come into chapter 8, we see that Gideon didn't understand this, or the people really didn't understand it, but even Gideon started to lose track of this as he chose to act like a king. He started punishing Israelites who refused to help him. He was taking the kings of the Midianites, and he was kind of setting up this stage for them to be executed, much like a king in that day, and those customs would do. He would try to have his son be the one who executed those kings, trying to show that he has a dynasty that he's trying to set up for himself. And then he goes and he makes a golden ephod out of people's jewelry, and he sets up a shrine to his glory in his city. And all the people, it says, whored after it. And it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. So Gideon didn't become a king. In fact, whenever the people said, you rule over us, Gideon, because of what he had done, they thought he was great. They wanted him to be king. Gideon says the right thing. He says, I will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. So he says the right thing, but then he does things that counteract that contradict that. He shows himself to be like a king in taking many wives and concubines. That's what kings did. And one of the sons that he had, he named Abimelech. Maybe you've heard that name before. Back whenever we studied through Abraham's life, we learned about a man named Abimelech. Abimelech showed up again. Another Abimelech showed up in Isaac's life. Abimelech was a common name because it meant son of a king. And in this storyline, the names mean something. All the names end up meaning something. Joash, the father of Gideon, means the Lord gives. Gideon means one who cuts down. And then you have this man, Abimelech, the son of a king. And he's one of the 70 sons. But what's interesting about Abimelech is he's the son of Gideon and a concubine. So he's not a legitimate heir to the throne even. He's just one of the offspring. But he's named Abimelech. He's named son of a king. And so we get that picture that even though Gideon said, the Lord will rule over you, he still kind of fancied himself king. I mean, why do you name your son the son of a king? It doesn't make sense. So Abimelech is feeling like he should be king, even though he's only one of the 70 sons, and even though he's not a very high-ranking one. So his mother is from a town called Shechem, and he goes to the elders of Shechem. Apparently Shechem's a great city in Israel. And he goes to the elders and he says, would it be better to have 70 men reigning over you or just one? And one from your own city? What? Like in the story, it's like, wait a second. No, none of these guys are reigning over anybody, right? The Lord is reigning over them. But no, even though Gideon said that, it's become obvious Gideon took the place of king, and now there's going to be 70 sons that are supposed to rise up and be the rulers over Israel. And Abimelech doesn't want that. So Abimelech makes a deal with the elders of Shechem, and he tells them, if you pay me so much money, then 70 pieces of silver, then I'll go out and hire men, and we'll go kill all these other brothers of mine so that I'm the only one who rules over you, and I will favor you because you're my people. And he goes out, he gets the money. The money is given to him from those elders because they go into a temple to Baal, and they get the money, and they give it to Abimelech, and he goes and hires worthless men to be his mercenaries, to go out and to kill his brothers. But of the 69 brothers, he only kills 68. One is left, the youngest. And that youngest name is Jotham. And Jotham, after he survives the murder of all of his brothers, except for Abimelech, he gets up on Mount Gerizim and he speaks to Abimelech in the hearing of all the people, a parable about trees. That's right, a parable about trees. He says, all the trees gathered together and they came to the olive tree and they said, rise up, olive tree, and rule over us. And the olive tree says, no, I've got it good. I'm fruitful. I don't see a need to rule over you. And so then they go to the fig tree and they say, fig tree, you're great, rule over us. Fig tree says, no, my life is sweet, my fruit is sweet, I'm good, I'm not going to rule over you. So then they move along and they come to the vine and they say, vine, almighty vine, rule over us. The vine says, I make wine and I'm enjoying that, so I will not rule over you. And when they can't get anyone else to rule over them, the trees go to a bramble bush. Bramble bush is just a dry bush that's like out in the desert. And they say to the bramble bush, oh, almighty bramble bush, please rule over us and let us enjoy the shade that you provide. And the bramble bush says, okay, if you'll anoint me as king over you, you can take refuge in my shade. But if you will not allow me to rule over you, then may fire come down out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. It's a very interesting parable because it's so ridiculous, right? I mean, why would cedars of Lebanon go to other trees and say, rule over us, right? I mean, they're cedars. They're like the kings. So why are they going to these places? And then why in the world would they think they could find shade under a bramble bush that is good for nothing, that has thorns instead of producing any fruit? But it's a picture. And Jotham makes it clear that this is a picture of the wickedness that's going on. He says, if you acted in good faith in what you did, then may everything go well for you. But if you have dealt treacherously and you have disregarded the mighty work of Jerubbaal, Gideon, and you have destroyed his lineage, then may the bramble bush that you've hired, Abimelech, cast fire on you, and may you burn him up. May y'all essentially destroy each other, is what he says this is all about. And so in a way, he's really prophesying and foretelling that they will consume each other. They will destroy each other. And that's what he is really calling for God to do. And that's exactly what we see happen. Instead of, and as we're reading through this, we notice that there's not going to be a judge in this story. Notice Jotham doesn't rise up as judge and deliver anybody. And there's not really a nation that has risen up to oppress Israel. But this has come up from within, that Abimelech in his greed has taken over the nation and become the first king. Do you know Abimelech was the first king? He has established himself, and he's not acting like he's not a king, like Gideon was. He is proclaiming himself king. And it says he ruled for 3 years in Israel. And he thinks that he's going to have the power to do it. And instead of God raising up a judge to defeat Abimelech, what God does is he sends an evil spirit to the elders and causes strife to come between the elders of Shechem and Abimelech and brings about the downfall. After he rules for 3 years, the elders are convinced by a man named Gael, the son of Abed, to rise up against Abimelech and to defeat him. And so Abimelech catches word of that, and Abimelech decides to wait for Gael to come, and he's going to ambush Gael, and he does. He ambushes him. He wins that fight, and then he goes up against the elders of Shechem, and he goes up against the whole city of Shechem, and he destroys it, and everybody's in this nice tall tower, and he goes and he grabs some dried up wood, and he takes it over to this tower, and he tells all his buddies to do the same, and they set the wood on fire, and they burn up thousands of people in the tower. And they sow the city in salt. There's just a complete razing of the city, a destruction of the city. It'll never be used again because Abimelech was betrayed. And so he goes up against Shechem and destroys Shechem. And then you would think that's the end of the story, but we know Abimelech has to die. So wait, how are the elders going to destroy Abimelech? Well, that's not what happens. Instead, Abimelech chooses to pursue another town, which is called Thebez, and he goes after this major town. Now, it's not clear why he chooses to go after this town. Maybe this is the town of Gael, or maybe this is a town that some of the elders escaped to. We don't really know. But he chooses in his glory and in his pomp as king to go out and to kill all the oppressors and all the people who would rise up in rebellion against his kingship, maybe. And he goes out against Thebez, and he's going to do the exact same thing to the city of Thebez. And as he comes up against that city and surrounds it and prepares to destroy it and to burn up the tower everyone's hiding in all over again with fire, he's bringing the wood up to burn it up. A woman up in the top of the tower takes a huge millstone that they would have used for crushing grain. It's a heavy millstone. And she pushes it off the tower, and it lands on Abimelech and crushes his head so that he will surely die. And Abimelech, oh, armor bearer, kill me so that they won't say that I died at the hand of a woman. Abimelech doesn't want to die at the hand of a woman. So he asks his own armor bearer to kill him. And he ends up dying in Thebez as he's trying to destroy the people who are there. So what we see very clearly is, in the very last verses of the chapter, verse 56, it says, "Thus God returned the evil of Abimelech, which he committed against his father, in killing his 70 brothers. And God also made all the evil of the men of Shechem return on their heads, and upon them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal." So we notice that God is the one who is the ultimate judge here. God is the one who destroys the wicked on both sides. All the wicked are taken care of, and God causes this animosity and strife to come up between them so that they kill each other and they die from it. After Abimelech dies, there's no longing for him to be restored as king, and there's no new king waiting to step in. Instead, everyone in Israel goes to their own home, and then they start to think differently about having a king. So what do we learn in this story? Well, this is a very clear picture for us of a man who tries to exalt himself above everybody else, isn't it? He thinks he can, by his wickedness, establish himself as the king. And the result of that is devastation. And this is the rule. This is the way it works. Anytime we try to establish ourselves and exalt ourselves, what we end up doing is destroying relationships and destroying people around us and destroying ourselves because we choose wicked means in order to exalt ourselves. And so there's a picture here, a moral picture for us of pursuing the path of self-exaltation being something that is going to be empty and cause devastation and destruction. God did not establish Abimelech to be the king. Abimelech thought he could make himself king. And all that did was result in a lot of strife. But as we read this story and we go back to chapter 8, and we think about Gideon, we notice that this all started with Israel wanting someone to be their king, wanting someone to rule over them. There's something in men that they just are craving for a physical person to exalt, a physical person to lift up, to rule over them. And whenever they can't find what they want, they settle for what they can find. And that's exactly what happened here. This is a story about a bramble bush that became king. That's the way Jephthah put it. Because the people were so desperate to have a physical king sit before them, they resorted to a man like Abimelech being their king. Well, what do we do? How do we act like this? Do you ever want to exalt somebody really high or lift somebody up? I mean, we do this all the time in our whole nation, right? We're constantly lifting up a political figure to be the Messiah, to be the one who will deliver us and do everything right. And then they fail us miserably because they're human, and they do that. Even in our own churches, we lift up the pastor, the preacher sometimes to be this otherworldly figure who can do no wrong and all of that. And I'm very grateful y'all aren't doing that. But there's a picture that we have in all the churches that the pastor's the guy, and look at him with his picture-perfect family and his picture-perfect smile, and everything about him is just so great. Why do we do that? Because we like the idea that there's this superhero who's going to sweep in and he's going to save the day and he's going to solve all of our problems. And we want to see someone. That gives us a sense of security. That gives us a sense of comfort in knowing that that person is there and that that person exists. But as we read through this story, we see that they are trying to set up a man to serve what only God can serve, to do what only God can do. Men can't fix the problems like we want them to, because the problems run deeper than men can solve. God is the one who solves. Not me, not the elders, God. And God is the king, and God is the ruler, and God is the one in control of everything. And he shows it in this very story. He's the one who has power. He's the one who's king. Another man wants to raise himself up. Look at how God can work. He can work without even lifting up another man, and he can cause there to be strife and cause them to kill themselves. He showed that even in the battle of Gideon. Whenever the 300 men broke their jars and shouted, and then all their enemies started killing each other. It happens again and again because God is the one who is king. God is the one who's in control. So we must never lift up a man in the place of God. I think that's the picture that we see in the story of Abimelech, because a man will be all too willing to take that role, and he'll be a bramble bush, and he'll burn things up and cause all kinds of problems. So we don't want that. You don't want me to be that. And I don't want to be that. And you don't want anybody else to come in here and be that either. If sometime I move on, you don't want me here anymore, something like that happens, then you're looking for somebody else. Don't look for the guy who wants the attention, who wants to rule over you. You know, in the New Testament, very clear picture that elders are not to lord it over the flock. That's not the role of an elder, to be the Lord. The Lord is the Lord. The elders are the shepherds who serve. And that's what my role is. I serve. So don't look to us as kings. Don't look to us as lords. Look to us as brothers who are striving to serve you, who are given a role and are supposed to be working within that role, and encourage us in that. But don't look to us for more than that, because God is the one who we should be looking to. And God understands that we need to see something physical. So what did he do? He gave us a king, a person to look at, Jesus. You know, in the Old Testament, they really struggled to understand who God was. And I think that was a lot of the problem and the desire to set up a king, because at least they can understand a human, but they can't understand God. He's beyond them. And the law, they didn't understand well enough because they didn't teach their children, they didn't train up in it to understand God through the law. But we not only have the law, we have Jesus. And so we have no need for a human figure to be our king and to rule over us in the spiritual realm, because in the Gospels we have revealed to us who God really is, who our king really is, what he was like. And guess what? He doesn't change. He hasn't changed. He's ruling in heaven. We don't see him right now, but we know he's there. And he's portrayed as having the same character, the same feelings, the same motives, and the same thoughts and desires as what he had whenever he was walking on the earth, and as we read about throughout the Gospels. So as we read this story, we learn that there's really a yearning inside of us for a king. And whenever we look to the New Testament, we see God gave us a king, a perfect man who can serve and fix what's really wrong inside of us. And that's what we should be doing, is looking to him to be the source of our salvation, the source of our joy, and the source of the solutions to all of our problems. But as we read through this story, I found it very fascinating, this whole idea of men setting up a bramble bush over them. But what I found very interesting is, if you go back to this parable, again, these words just really struck me at the end of the parable, or at the end of the beginning section of the parable, before he explains it. Verse 15, he says, "The bramble said to the trees, 'If in good faith you are anointing me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon.'" Well, who are the cedars of Lebanon in this? Well, it's Israel. This is a picture of what they have done. Israel has set up a king, said, "Rule over us, Gideon," and now "Rule over us, Abimelech." And they're cedars. They're cedars of Lebanon. These are the cedars throughout the Bible that are like the kings of the trees. They're up on the Mount Lebanon, and they're huge. And they tear them down, and they bring them down the river to come to the temple, and they use those timbers to establish the temple. I mean, the cedars of Lebanon are a big deal. And here they are looking at olive trees, and looking at fig trees, and looking at vines, and looking at bramble bushes, and like, "Rule over us, rule over us." Rule yourselves. I mean, this is insane. It's ridiculous. And the idea that the fire is going to come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon in judgment, like, no. Cedars of Lebanon should be the ones who are providing shade for everybody else. Israel is supposed to be cedars of Lebanon. That's the picture here. They don't see who they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be rulers on earth. They're supposed to be the kings of the earth because they have a special relationship with God. So the parable is fascinating because of that last little statement, which shows us that cedars are seeking a bramble to rule over them. And whenever you compare that with us, it's the same kind of thing, that we're looking for things and people to rule over us, to give us some sense of satisfaction and fulfillment that they never will, when in fact we are cedars of Lebanon. We walk with Christ. It says in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 12, "He is not ashamed to call them brothers." We are brothers of the King. We have a relationship with the true King. And so we don't need bramble bushes to rule over us. We have been made rulers with Christ. We have a crown waiting for us when this life is over. And the picture of the kingdom in the parable of the mustard seed is that it is a little bitty mustard seed that's sown in the field, and it's the smallest of all seeds, but it grows larger than all the garden plants and becomes a tree so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. That's who we are. We're a part of this kingdom that provides shade and comfort and help for other people. We don't need them to provide it for us. We are the providers because of what God has given us in Christ. So I think it's fascinating that the people of Israel don't see this about themselves. And I think as I read that, I notice sometimes I don't think this about myself. But this is who God has called us to be. This is why that parable of the mustard seed is so fascinating, because even though it's this tiny seed and it seems insignificant, God is able to take what is lowly and seen as insignificant and make it great and make it provide for other people and fruitful. And that's what we're supposed to be, all of us. So we don't need a man to come in and to tell us what to do and how to be. We have everything we need in the man, in our God, in our Savior, Jesus Christ. And he's given us everything we need to rule appropriately in this world and to have power over it and not be overcome by it. So remember that and keep that in mind throughout this week. Thank you so much for your attention tonight. Abimelech, an amazing story of God acting and God working in a way that is unprecedented, unseen throughout the Bible. But we're going to see that happen again with another man who becomes king. And he has an evil spirit that messes him up too. And we'll learn about that later. But anyway, thank you all for your attention tonight. If anybody has a need, this is a time we give for an invitation. You can come forward and let us know what your needs are. We'd be happy to pray for you or help you in any way. Please come.